And that's what the inner kingdom is, awakening the latent power within each of us, within the spine, and bringing it to focus on everything we do.
All our labors, all our joys and woes.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to be together on this nice rainy Seattle Sunday morning. So since Jyotish and I don't come here that often, we'll both speak today, but more briefly. So we have really a very central theme this morning that Jacob just read. And I'll begin with this Whispers from Eternity by our Guru. Burn thou my frailties in the furnace of trials. In the furnace of trials, the ore of my life is being purified. The fire of experience melts away all my delusions' dross. O divine artisan, burn away all my impurities. Bring out in me the steel of endurance. Hone it to the fine edge of deep calmness. Forge in me from the tempered steel of mental balance, sharp swords of self-control and firm tenacity. With the weapons of inner equilibrium, teach me to fight every enemy of distraction. It's a beautiful passage. So, our theme this morning, as we heard, was the inner kingdom. And when our great Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, came to the West and was sent to the West by our line of gurus in 1920, one of his mission statements was to show the underlying similarity of the teachings of Christianity and of Hinduism. And he wrote and spoke of this often. Your spiritual director here, one of your Nayaswamis Jyotish, has just finished a book recently called The Once and Future Christ, in which he talks about comparing these truths. But it's very important for us to understand that so much of what Christ shared was not understood at the time. Things like, lo, you look here and there, but the kingdom of God is within you. Why, he said, why call you me Lord? You too are gods, he said. And on, he said things like that. If you had the faith of a grain of mustard seeds, you too could perform miracles, and you could move mountains. But all this is sort of hidden away because people didn't understand it. Christ was teaching at the depth of Kali Yuga, when people weren't really ready to receive this. But remember, there's many, many accounts of the lost years of Jesus when he went to India for a long period of time. Really, most of his life was spent studying with sages in the Himalayas and in Tibet, learning the subtle teachings. And then he came and he had to veil them because people weren't ready to understand them. The master came to the West, as we said in 1920. What did he call his mission? The second coming of Christ. Because he was bringing the teachings, that he was explaining what Christ really meant by so many of these things. And what we heard today is about the inner kingdom and what the teachings of yoga uniquely have brought to the world is the understanding of the human potential for evolution of consciousness because of our subtle spine, the energy spine, and the centers of higher consciousness, the chakras, which when we meditate and if you pursue it and practice Kriya Yoga, you become aware of that energy in the spine. And you become aware that there's so much more to you than just your moods. I mean, we all have them, your reactions, your habits, but there's a part of us, like Christ said, ye too are gods. There's a part of us that's never loses its connection with God, no matter how far away from it we run, no matter how much we try to deny it or misunderstand it. That divinity is within each of us. That's the inner kingdom. And the practice of Kriya Yoga, meditation, study, all of these things helps us to become aware of it. But another thing that our line of gurus brought at this time to humanity was the understanding that you don't have to run away to a Himalayan cave or to a monastery, but with a concentrated, focused mind, interiorized and focused, everything in your life is improved. Everything in your life changes if we can interiorize our energy and then live our life in that way. There's a wonderful story that we heard a few years ago when we were in India, and it was told to us by a man who had been a very close and dear friend of Swami Kriyananda. Both he and his mother had been. Those of you who have read The New Path, you remember the story. There was a really quite a remarkable and saintly woman. We had the opportunity to meet her, Rani Ban, and her son Indu Ban. And she was outwardly just a housewife, but great saints came and stayed in her home in Old Delhi. Sri Yukteswar stayed there, and many, many others stayed there. But she just lived a simple, seemingly normal life. Well, her son told us this story, and he was a wonderful soul and passed away last year. But he said in the late 1950s, when Swami Kriyananda was in India, he was still working with SRF at that time, and he had gone to visit another man, a Swami, a teacher, a spiritual leader who had a very big following. I won't say his name because the story isn't very flattering to him, but so Swami went with humility to get the darshan of a reputedly saintly man in India. And the man, this other Swami said to Kriyanandaji, he said, Yogananda's teachings weren't right. He said he taught that the mantra was Hang Sa. It's not Hang Sa, it's So Hum. And with respect, because Swami was a disciple with every cell of his being, he said, thank you very much, sir, and he left. He didn't want to be around this fellow who was speaking disparagingly of his guru's teachings. But it upset him because he didn't know he couldn't read Sanskrit, as some of us are blessed to do. He didn't know the truth of what it was. And so they were down south. I believe they were, I don't remember exactly the city. Do you remember?
I think Bangalore.
Yeah, I thought Bangalore too. And so he took the first flight he could get up to Delhi, and this is before cell phones, he took a taxi from the airport to Indu's house, and he sat in the taxi and he called up to Indu, come down, I'm not getting out of the car until, Swamiji was saying, until we can solve this. Because Indu's knew of a man, Swami writes of him in the book, A Visit of Saints to India, Narayan Swami, who was a brilliant man. He knew every scripture, every book he ever read. He knew the word and the page and everything. And he knew that he would know the answer because he was very learned in the Sanskrit texts and scriptures. He said, come, I'm not going to get out of the taxi till we go see Narayan Swami, which was like Swami because he was so determined. And so Indu got in the car and they went to see Narayan Swami, who must have been a playful soul because he saw that Swami was really upset. And he said, I have a question and you must answer it. And Narayan Swami said, please relax, you need a little cup of tea. Let's have tea first. And he had the tea brought out and dessert. And Swami was just jumping up and down to get the answer. He was so intense. And finally, after some time had gone by, I think he even said, now let's have dinner. And then Swami Narayan said to his assistant, he said he had a room that was just totally lined with books, floor to ceiling, thousands of them, ancient, sacred scriptures. And he said to his assistant, go into that room, and on the shelf, the bookcase nearest to the back, on the 5th shelf up, the 4th book from the right, open it up and open it to the 17th page and the 3rd paragraph. And he brought it down and he said, read it now to us. And it said, there is a version of the mantra in which it's called Soham, but the ancient original version is Hong Sa. And that's all Swami needed to know. But that ability to concentrate, I mean, you think, oh, well, that's a magic power. Maybe, but we all have it. We all have the ability to focus on what we need to do. And not to imply that Swami didn't have that ability. A friend of ours told us something that happened in the early years of Ananda. Maybe some of you may know Prakash, a very wonderful devotee. He was one of the carpenters that was helping to build Swami's house. And he had a, what did they call him, a horse? Sawhorse? Yeah, sawhorse. They had some boards and he was sawing. And, he was just kind of doing it. And then he said he saw Swami come and he stood right behind him. He said, all of a sudden, that whole experience of sawing the board changed. And my mind became so focused, and I could see the slightest little bend, if the saw bent, and I could see the straightness and how to do it. And then he said, and then Swami walked away and it was gone. But he was just showing him, you have that potential to focus your mind like that. And that's what the inner kingdom is. It's not running away from the world. It's not abandoning your dharma, but it's doing everything with utmost attention and precision and awakening the latent power within each of us, within the spine, and bringing it to focus on everything we do. And what happens when we do that? Well, things like judgment go away. We see people for who they are. We see the God in them. We see the beauty in them. Swami would, if all the gifts he gave us, and I could spend hours talking about them, one of the best was he gave us faith in our own spiritual potential. He helped us believe in ourselves that we could do this. And you've heard us say, perhaps, he would walk into a room and say, good morning, you great souls. And we would look to see who he was talking about. But he was talking to us. And so when we develop this inner kingdom, it's not that we shut down, but we open up to the beauty of what life really is. And you help people to see it in themselves as well. So and when you relate to people, we saw Swami so often, just either to a stranger or just someone he knew, not, casually, just be able to give them the gift of divine energy and love and depth, and people would just walk away changed. It was so beautiful to see that. And for us all to realize that it's not enough just to say, well, this is who I am. Yes, as that section on truthfulness, look at yourself and be honest. Don't say, well, I'm a great soul, I'm free. If you know you're not, but on some level, you are a great soul and you are free. So it's a balance between the two where you see your potential, but at the same time, you realize I'm moving towards it. I'm not there yet, but I'm moving towards it. And the important things in developing this inner kingdom, yes, meditation, Kriya Yoga, attunement with the Guru. I can't tell you how important it is. We can't get there on our own. That's why the gurus come. They come as lighthouses to show within us the inner kingdom, to awaken that inner kingdom. So attunement with the Guru, study the Guru's teachings. Don't be eclectic. It dilutes your attunement with the Guru. Focus on what our masters taught. Focus on the 140 books that Swami wrote. You don't have to say, well, I read that already. You know, I'm still like, oh my gosh, I forgot about that book. I don't even remember that Swami wrote. I don't even remember what it says. I should read that again. And on and on. They gave us the wealth of study for many, many lifetimes. But we have to say, I am hungry and I'm thirsty and I want this. And if we can do that and keep doing it and be around other people who are in tune with that, then we begin to realize that inner kingdom, it's within me. And I'm beginning to experience it. So just to sum up, and then we'll invite Jyotish to come up and say something if he wants. The kingdom of God is within you. And it's our job, really the reason we took incarnation. And don't sell yourself short. You would not be sitting in this temple. You would be not listening to the writings and the teachings of this great line of Guru if your soul wasn't seeking something more. And I'll close by inviting each one of you. I like to do this for myself, an exercise of introspection. Try to remember the earliest memories you have of when you began looking, when you realized this world wasn't what it seemed, and you began looking for something more. When I do that, it gives me confidence that I've always wanted this, I just didn't know it. And so find those memories within yourself where you looked at life. I remember as another memory from my childhood, I would watch my parents, who were fine, wonderful, dharmic people, but they didn't have a spiritual life. And I would watch them run around and do all these things, and oh, we forgot to pack that, and I would just think, why are they so involved with all this? It's just not that important, but it was really important to them. But just try to remember the first whispers in your heart of when your soul says, I want to know something more, and I want to find that within myself. It will help you to keep going. So God bless you all.
Hello, friends. So I'll say a few words too. So one of the things that Swami said in that reading is that one of the difficulties that we have when we go into meditation, maybe go into our little meditation room and close the door, and we feel that the big vast world is out there and we're kind of missing out on things. And then we're coming into this little room, and somehow, maybe even if we're trying our best to meditate, it's a little bit boring and a little bit difficult, and we aren't getting what we want. Well, we haven't yet gotten our energy detached from the outer world into the spine and freed our energy so that we can perceive the inner kingdom. But when we do, we find that it's quite the opposite. That what we think of as the vast world around us is like a tiny little pinprick in terms of what the reality is. And so these stories of miracles and the stories of the saints that excite us are because they seem to be able to break the limitations of reality as we think of reality. Well, reality as we think of reality is unreality. It's a virtual reality, it's a video game, it's a dream, it's a movie, whatever kind of image we use, it's not the real world. And so I sometimes think about this in meditation, trying to break the delusion of the senses that this is the whole of reality, that how do we know that we're in the complete world of possibilities when we were born into a tiny little, it's like we were born in the movie theater. We've never seen anything else except a series of movies. Or we were born into a virtual reality, and we don't need those clunky glasses and earphones because we were born into a sensing unit that's got visual senses and auditory senses and feeling, touch, smell, and so on. We were born into a unit, and the only reality that we've been able to see is that which is shown to us by the senses. And so we think we know reality, and these other people who, the saints, come and they tell us, well, there's a much greater reality outside of this one, but you have to detach yourself. You have to detach your life force from being connected only to this world of the senses. So part of meditation is meant to detach ourselves. And it isn't something that is done mentally. It isn't, I mean, we have to use our minds. It's one of our tools. But it isn't the tool that gets us behind the curtain of the mind. We find God. The restlessness of the mind actually prevents us from finding God. So we think that we're perceiving reality, but our senses really just shut us down. Floating through this room, if we had the proper television set and cable hookup here, we could see 500 different television stations. None of them showing anything good, but nonetheless, there are 500 of them that we could tune into, and all of those vibrations are floating through the room right now. We have no perception of it whatsoever. We have no perception outside of a very, very narrow little ability, the vibrations that our senses can pick up. And then even that, our minds close down because we can't even deal with that. The amount of information that comes through our seeing or our hearing or whatever. There was a wonderful experiment where they had some college students, and they told them the task was they had two people on a basketball court, and they were passing the ball back and forth. And they said, you have to count. We're going to test you on counting how many times they passed the basketball back and forth. And so these students were, I don't know, 100 of them, they were all concentrated on that. And then when the experiment ended and they gathered the 100 together, most of them got the number of passes back and forth. But the real experiment was, how many of you saw the man in the gorilla suit? What? A man in a gorilla suit walked 10 feet behind the two people passing the basketball back and forth, and not 1 out of 10 of the students were able to perceive that, even though it was obviously there for the eyes to perceive. So all of this is just meant to say that the reality that we think is the big reality is the tiny little reality. And so the teachings of the saints and the miracles that we talk about, why are they so important? As Christ said, lest they see miracles, they will not believe. And when Yogananda first was writing the autobiography of a yogi, he was going to call it the Yogi Christs of India. And the reason he put so many miracles in there was, lest they see miracles, they will not believe. And so it's almost like they have to first start with breaking our just tenuous grip on the reality of this world as being the reality. They have to break that a little bit. No, we can levitate if we want to. We can create a golden palace with diamonds and rubies if we want to. We can walk on water. We can heal the sick. We can raise the dead. Who's we? All of us. But we have to get out of the reality of limitation that we think is the ultimate reality. And so that's what we're trying to do. Now, the way to do it, the exit door, is not by going farther out, it's by going farther in. And so we have to withdraw the life force into the spine. This is meditation. Working with energy, working with pranayama, working with the techniques that have been given to us. So we withdraw the life force into the spine, and we bring it up the spine. And if we can do it successfully, we can pass the life force out through the spiritual eye, and then we can perceive the beginnings of this vast, vast kingdom that is beyond the senses and beyond the ability of the senses to relate to that. And so we're trying to practice that, but we've had the experience of being able to do that very successfully many, many times before. It's called death. The life force gets withdrawn and it comes up. And Yogananda said, if the life force exits at the medulla, that means that we're still attached to the ego, and the ego connected to the senses, meaning that we will have to reincarnate into a world that is dependent on senses. This world will have to reincarnate into the physical world, maybe not even this planet. In fact, Yogananda said we go to different planets. He said otherwise we'd catch on too quickly. Seems like Divine Mother's cheating a little there. You know? By the time we get here, we want to catch on, but most people don't. They want to play. You know, you have a free roll of tickets to all the rides in Disneyland. You don't want to be pulled out right away. You want to play a little bit. So, but you and I, we're tired. We're tired of the roller coaster or banging the cars together, or even the Matterhorn, you know, all of that we want out. So we're trying to learn essentially how to die, but consciously. And if we can do that, then we exit into a greater world. Now, there are many, many, many stories of people who have had their life force withdrawn because they have died, but then come back. So these near-death experiences, you can read about them, and basically what you read about is the world of yogis, the world of spiritual masters who have been able to consciously exit the body. They've done it, the near-death experience people have done it, but only for a little while, and then they come back and tell us about their experiences. I remember reading one, and he said that in that astral world that he inhabited for a little while, he said there was a flock of birds flying over, and the flapping of their wings had a tinkling, murmuring sound. He said it was almost as if the stained glass windows of a church were able to make a sound. And that murmuring sound, he said, sounded like a choir of angels. What's the murmuring sound? It's Om in our tradition. Amen or Amin. All spiritual traditions have some word that tries to capture that sound. But words they can't capture it, because the tiny little ability to hear that our ears have is only the pinprick of a funnel that opens up out into infinity. And we're down there at the very narrow end of that funnel trying to figure things out. Well, thank goodness these great saints come and they give us the teachings to exit. So if at the time of death we're not so attached to the senses and to unfulfilled desires, or positive and negative, so we want that, or we want to come back and we want to get that guy because he did us dirt 37 years ago and we've got to get revenge. You know, if we're attached to all of that, then we have to come back. And if we exit through the medulla, then we have to do that. But the practice of yoga has us concentrating on the spiritual eye, bringing life force there. And if we, at the time of death, we can exit through the spiritual eye, then we go into the astral plane, which Swami Sri Yukteswar describes quite clearly in the autobiography of a yogi. You should read those chapters again, the resurrection of Sri Yukteswar, where he talks about the astral world and what's there. So, you know, in this world, Babaji is the miracle worker because he can manifest a golden palace. In the astral world, where we go in between physical births, we can all manifest golden palaces. We can go up to a tree and we can say, I think I'd like a mango today. And the tree produces a mango and the person next to us says, no, I want a nectarine. And the tree gives them a nectarine and we float between planets and beautiful things happen. We're in another world, but we aren't limited in that world through our physical senses. We're working in the astral world, and we have an astral body within us, and that astral body functions according to the sense of intuition, which just knows things and can do things. It doesn't have to figure it out with the mind. But these great saints come in part and do these miracles in order to help us understand that we have to break the, our grasp, our desperate grasp on thinking that this is the only thing. There's a story about Ananda Ma, who I met, and she didn't have the chance to have an education. She was illiterate. And so she got through to about, second grade or something like that at school. And then the family that she was born in was so poor that she had to work. She scrubbed and worked. Her hands were raw as a little child. But every couple of years, a kind of district, education checker would come to check the local school to see whether they were up to snuff. So it was as if they would come and they would test all the students and then they'd find an average. And so when those tests came, the teacher would have Ananda Ma come because she could pass all the exams. She could do all the mathematics. She could do illiterate. When she signed her name, she put a little dot. But she passed all the exams. And later in life, these Sanskrit scholars would come and they would ask her to explain this passage or explain that passage. Or there would be times where someone of her disciples needed an initiation, and she would start chanting Sanskrit, which she couldn't read. She would start chanting Sanskrit and chant it for a half hour and do this initiation. Where did all that come from? Not the mind, not the senses, none of that. Yoga, I talk about Ananda Ma, but Yogananda was the same. Intuition allows, these great souls, they inhabit a reality far, far beyond. So what's really, the game that's really going on is that your soul and my soul is hungry to experience that expansion. And a call from our soul goes up to God, and God responds by sending us a master who will help us out of it. And so they bring teachings, but more than that, they bring grace and love. Master said, I'm just going to end with this, that, we have this little ceremony, the purification ceremony. And we say, the Master says, open your heart to me, and I will enter and take charge of your life. It sounds just like words, kind of a nice sentiment, and then we receive a blessing. But Master, with his first disciple, Dr. Lewis, came, and Dr. Lewis he had read about if your eye be single, you can, your whole body will be filled with light. And he was desperate to know what that meant. He came on Christmas Eve, and Master had been giving a talk, and he came to Master's hotel room. He said, can you explain that to me? And Master said, I think I can. And Master put his forehead against Dr. Lewis's, and he experienced the opening of the spiritual eye, and his body was filled with light. And Master said to him, he knew the disciple-guru relationship. He said, I will give you my unconditional love. Will you give me yours? And Dr. Lewis said, yes, that's opening our heart. And then Master rubbed his hands like that, Dr. Lewis said, now I can take charge of your life. So that's where that sentiment comes from, or those words. But Master said that with his disciples, see, our job is to do our best. Master does as much work for us as we do for ourselves, and God doubles it up. So we only do a quarter of what is required. But Master said for his disciples, he goes in and he helps straighten out the kinks that are in their spine that allow this life force to flow, until eventually it will flow in such a way that we can exit the limited world into the vast world of the inner kingdom, where so much more awaits us. So, let's get on with the journey. God bless you.
John renouncing